Hey, good afternoon. Uh, I need to get one administrative thing out of the way. Your parking is free today. All you need to do is when you go through the gate, just say, I'm with Triumph, and give them the ticket. You don't have to get anything stamped or anything else. So I think we created some confusion in that, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. Good afternoon. I'm Will Chase, and I'm President and CEO of Triumph Bank. It's my privilege to welcome you here today to our first annual Business Triumph Seminar. In the past, we've sponsored things like this that others have put on. This is our first attempt. This is a self-sourced program, so we think we've done a very good job, and we're excited to host this event for y'all, our friends, clients, business associates, and owners. Our goal at Triumph is just to be more than a source of money or a place to deposit your funds. We strive to really understand our customers' businesses, their goals and their dreams, so we can provide information and ideas to help them not just grow the business, but to grow the value of their business. That takes a team approach to do that, and that's part of why we're here today. So we brought some industry leaders here for y'all to talk, to be with today, ask questions later on and these are the people that can help you navigate through the different life cycles of your business. You will find that our speakers in the panel today they're very smart, they're very experienced. They're experienced in working alongside their clients in business transitions and sales, and they have real life experiences in both buying and selling businesses. I do want to note, to throw an audible out here since it's football season, we do have one change in our panel today. Mary Helen Owen is with us today. She is here in place of John Babango. John, this is a true story, had to leave town unexpectedly because he's working on a purchase transaction for another Ferris Babango client. So he had to leave, and so Mary Helen, we're glad that you're here with us to do that. I now have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker this afternoon, Rob Wolfe. Rob is a certified financial planner, certified business exit consultant. He lives in Fort Lauderdale, and he specializes in working with successful business owners and entrepreneurs to build, grow, and transition their businesses. We met him last night. He's a lot of fun to be with. He is also very determined. He was a wrestler in college, and he's known for, if you have a problem, he's very good. He doesn't stop until the mission's complete. And so he's writing his first book on exit strategies for business owners, and it's going to be released in the first quarter of 2018. So again, thanks for being here. It's a great place. Hope you enjoy the zone. It's a great facility here, and I hope that you'll help me to welcome our speaker, Rob Wolfe.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and your executive team and the rest of the panelists. We had a great time last night, a lot of fun. And thank you all for coming today. I know how incredibly busy everybody's day can be, and certainly thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. Throughout my presentations, I tend to like to get some interaction. I know we're in a very high-tech, innovative space, but when I ask for some feedback, if you could just kind of holler it out. In the essence of time, we don't have a whole lot of time together today. So with that in mind, let's start. How many of you, by a show of hands, are currently a business owner? Wow, that's a lot. That's good. Okay. How many of you have helped a business owner through either a buy or sell transaction at one point? Okay, great. So far, I think we're almost at 100%. And last but certainly not least, how many of you have been through a buy or a sell transaction? Okay, very good. All right. Well, thank you. You guys passed the first test. Today, I have a handful of topics that I'm going to cover, each of which could literally be an entire day workshop. So if it feels like we're going kind of fast or I'm going kind of fast, I am, because I promised that we would finish at least my part of the commentary in less than 30 minutes. So first, converging factors facing today's business owners. Second, challenges for business owners to overcome. Third, valuing businesses, and that could be not only an entire day, that one could be, I don't know, an entire semester or an entire graduate curriculum. Exit planning pitfalls to avoid, and last but certainly not least, building your high-powered exit team. And by the way, we're sitting here all today because we're either clients of or associated or affiliated with Triumph Bank, and they are a true partner. And the theme that they've been talking about, and it's very coincidental, but I incorporated it into my own presentation, is that of a quarterback. So you'll hear some sports imagery throughout my presentation. Okay, supplemental materials. Throughout my presentation, you'll see a little light bulb. You see a little light bulb there? What that means is that we have a white paper, an article, or some resource that might be of interest to you on that particular topic. So if you're interested in whatever that topic is, just talk to your Triumph Bank banker, and they can get it to you, all right? So before I really get into the meat of my presentation, I'm gonna tell you a quick personal story. I'll make it fast. I am an entrepreneur. Although I got kind of a late start, I started my first business at the age of 10. I'm originally from a little tiny town in Pennsylvania. It snows there. So my first business was a snow shoveling business. What did I learn from that? I learned dedication. I learned commitment. And I learned the importance of being willing to do things when other people weren't. Think about it. Snow days. Probably don't get too many snow days here, but it's when it snows too much and it's not safe to get kids or teachers to school. Well, we got a pretty good number of snow days. All my friends were building snow forts and having snowball fights and doing all kinds of fun things. I was knocking on doors, shoveling driveways, and it was awesome. So, first business, snow shoveling. From there, did a lot of other different entrepreneurial things as a kid, lawn maintenance, gypsy moth extermination service. We'll tell you about that later if you want to know. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, have also purchased a fee-based financial planning firm as well as sold one. So I have a little bit of experience in terms of being an entrepreneur, being on different sides of a transaction, but in all of those years, I, as a financial planner, working with business owners, so business owners are the core of my financial planning practice. In addition to that, I have two other niches that I focus on. One is within professional sports, athletes, coaches, team executives, and owners, as well as specialty physicians, all of which have, at some point, an interest in either acquiring a business or selling a business. So when we would do financial planning for business owners, we would do what pretty much every other great certified financial planner would do. We would ask our business owner clients, how much is your business worth today? They would give us a number. We would write it down. When do you plan on selling it? When I'm 65. Okay. How much is it going to grow between now and then? They would tell us. Guess what? None of those numbers were right. Ever. Ever. Because the business owner would say, hey, my business is worth 20 million bucks. Okay, great. Well, why is it worth $20 million? Well, you know, that's what I'd sell it for. Okay, that's good. So my life changed business-wise going back, I would say 5 or so years ago. I had a particular client that at the time asked me to help him sell his business. And that might sound like an interesting challenge to take on. But in that particular case, it was bittersweet because this particular client and I had had a similar conversation many times in the past. And in fact, he had 2 different transactions that almost came to fruition, neither of which did. So in this particular case, I thought, if I say yes this time, we need to really make sure that we get this ball across the goal line versus, three it out. So before I said yes, I did a lot of soul searching and a lot of thinking and contemplating. And what I really wanted to figure out in my own mind was, why the heck didn't these other 2 transactions come to fruition? What happened? Because I don't want to invest my own time, his time, in order to really get there and not have anything happen. So what I came to the conclusion of, there were 2 key factors that played against him. One is randomness. So the 2 potential buyers, he just met randomly. He met one guy on a private jet, and they just started talking, and it led down a path. And the second one he met at a golf course. Great. The second was, his business was not ready to be sold. It was not transition ready, not even close. It would be like having an awesome home or an awesome piece of property with a home on it, on a cliff overlooking the ocean, but the house is in massive need of disrepair. The roof leaking, you get the idea, right? That was kind of his business, even though it was a cash generating machine. So I told him that I would help him. And that help came in the form of getting engaged to help him analyze his business. So my first thought was, well, heck, there has to be a company out there that can help my client prepare for this transition. And through the process of the due diligence that I did, I literally talked to almost 60 different companies on the telephone and met with about half of them. And not one of them was I comfortable enough to put my name behind and say, hey, Mr. Client, this is who I recommend you use. So I thought, goodness, I'm going to fail before I really get too far into this. So I did what most people do. When you have a big problem, what do? We Google things. That's what I did. So I've been very blessed to not need a lot of sleep. So it was literally about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And I wake up and my brain starts churning. I'm sure we've all been there. And I thought, well, heck, I'm not going back to sleep. So I may as well just go grab my computer and start working. So I very quietly grabbed my laptop. My wife's sleeping next to me. I started doing my work. And the deeper and deeper I got into this research, the more excited I became. Like literally excited. I was having a Jerry Maguire moment. You guys remember Jerry Maguire? So I knew at that moment that I had to start a business to help clients prepare their businesses for sale. Now, I did something that, I don't know how many of you are married, how many of you aren't, but I did something that wasn't very smart. I woke my wife up while it was still very dark, and I proceeded to share with her my excitement and my enthusiasm on my Jerry Maguire moment about the converging factors, why I thought this was such a brilliant idea. And that's what I'd like to share with you next. And just to be fair, she was a little bit ticked off at first, but she very quickly overcame it, and my enthusiasm very quickly caught on. So let's talk about these converging factors. I have 4 to go through with you here today. First, aging demographic. Aging demographic. We're all getting older. Now, I would say with the exception of my wife, who looks, first of all, she's a little bit older than me, and she looks like she's at least a decade younger than me. So other than her, everybody's getting older. So let's focus on baby boomers for a second. Depends on what numbers you believe. 75, 80 million baby boomers in this country. Starting in 2011, 10,000 baby boomers started to turn 65 every single day. That trend is expected to continue until 2029. So think about that. It's about 300,000 people turning 65 every day. Great. Well, what does that have to do with business? Not every baby boomer owns a business. Not every business is owned by a baby boomer. So let's play out the stats. Depending on how you define small business or private business, between 65 and 70% of businesses today in this country are owned by baby boomers. It's a pretty big number, right? Nobody's getting any younger. So that's factor 1, aging demographic. Factor 2, most people who own businesses have a disproportionately large percentage of their personal net worth tied up in the business. Some as high as 80 or 90% of their net worth. So as a result, it's probably going to be highly likely that they'll need to extract some value from that business in order to be okay financially. Make sense? This would be where you'd help me out. Thank you. The third, it's a seller's market. I'm just getting you warmed up because now I really need your help. Seller's market. So far we've been talking about sellers. Well, guess what? In order for a company to sell, there has to be somebody or some entity on the other side, right? So, who are the dominant buyers of private businesses? This is where you help me again. Dominant buyers of private businesses. Who are the buyers? Private equity groups. Very good. Other small businesses, absolutely. Employees, fantastic. What was that? Competitors, that's good. All right, so you guys did a good job. Stars. Here's just a short, very non-inclusive list. So private equity funds, family offices, wealthy individuals, other private companies, as well as publicly traded companies buy private companies, right? So I want to focus on private equity funds. Private equity funds, a lot of them, have done such a great job with their earlier funds that investors said, heck, you got me 15, 20, 30, whatever the percentages are, but just fantastic returns, that when the private equity funds open their next fund, they get a lot of money to invest, which is, you would think, a good thing. As we sit here today, well, at the end of the second quarter, at least the numbers I've seen, the amount of money in private equity funds alone awaiting deployment is just under $1 trillion. Now that doesn't include other businesses that are waiting to buy, doesn't include wealthy individuals, doesn't include family offices, so just under $1 trillion. Now I don't know the last time any of you wrote down the number 1 trillion. It's the number 1 followed by 12 zeros. Big number, right? All right, so that's a factor, but the other factor is there aren't enough transferable businesses available for these funds to place their money. There just aren't. A lot of businesses, but they're not ready to be purchased. That's a problem because the private equity funds have investors that are wanting these great returns, and they're certainly not getting them sitting in cash, right? What's cash pay, minus something? Well, you guys have great rates, so you have fantastic rates. Good job. But other places have terrible, terrible rates on their cash. So what do? What are they doing? They're coming downstream. So if a private equity fund, for example, used to only buy companies that had a valuation of, I don't know, $50 million, now maybe they're fishing in the pool that has down to all the way to $20 million. So what the heck does that do? Classic supply and demand, right? We've all taken economics class at some point. If the supply goes down and the demand is there, the price is going to go up. So these smaller companies that used to not even be able to get the attention of these big buyers, not only are they getting the attention, but they're getting so much attention that the multiples of EBITDA or however else they're being valued are going up. Make sense? So that's converging factor number 3. And last but certainly not least is there's a tremendous lack of planning within the business owners themselves. Again, lots of statistics, I'm not trying to kill you with them, but here on the slide it shows 84% of the business owners said that they needed to sell their business in order to be okay financially, yet only 17%, based on the study that was done last year, actually had a written plan. Wow. Aging demographic, need to monetize, lots of cash on the sideline chasing businesses, the small group of businesses that are available, and the business owner's not really that prepared. So far, these are good things, right? These are good factors as a business owner that should, hopefully, if you're a business owner, make you say, maybe it's a good time to get started. Well, there are also some negative reasons why you should want to get started. Negative reasons. Just because your business has done well, just because it's doubled or tripled over the last short amount of time, doesn't mean that trend will continue. There are things out there in the marketplace that can eviscerate your business overnight. Think about the impact technology has had on different industries. Now, I'm dating myself, but I've purchased a record in a music store. I've gone to Blockbuster Video hoping to watch a nice video and get there and you're like, oh man, they don't have it. Right? We've all been there. Talk about Amazon. Somebody today, while we were waiting to come in here, was talking about the Amazon effect in the local community. So industries can be eviscerated overnight. There could also be changes in the industry. Could be regulatory changes. There could be legislative changes. Heck, in the financial services industry, there was just a huge body of law passed, the Department of Labor law, the fiduciary standards law, that is expected to drive almost 20% of people who are financial advisors out of the business. Now, Mike, you and I had a conversation about cleansing, right? So maybe it's a good thing for those of us who are prepared for it. Have a nice cleanse, get rid of 20% of the competition. But certainly some negative reasons why it may make sense to prepare. So if business owners are successful, they're driving these incredible growth engines in their company, why don't they prepare? Why don't they have plans in place? And this one's for you to help me again. Anybody? Say it again? You're busy running the business, absolutely. This is the quietest group I've ever spoken to. No one to turn to, very good. Maybe one or two more? Lack of a team. And emotional and fear. Good. You guys, again, get a gold star. So here's my list. Procrastination. Heck, we all went to college. We knew in the beginning of the semester our term paper was due, 8 weeks in. And how many of us did it in the beginning? Come on, let's be honest. We all waited to the night before. I know I did. And pulled an all-nighter. Superman effect. I feel this every day. At one point in my life, I really felt I was bulletproof. And somehow, I still think that sometimes. Maybe not as much as I used to. But to some extent, I think a lot of very successful business owners feel that way to some extent. And that's an impediment that they have to at least mentally overcome. Lack of knowledge or not knowing where to start. That's really the impetus behind the book that I'm writing. And by the way, writing a book's really hard. It's taking way longer than I thought. But not knowing where to start. Content that their business is their personal ATM machine. It's like, hey, I'm making $10 million a year. Why would I even spend a minute on anything else? This is rolling, and it's good. Why would I contemplate anything else? And then the next three I'm going to expand a little bit more upon. The business and business owner are inseparable, lack of mental readiness and lack of financial readiness. Okay, so what can be the largest transition impediment to overcome? I'll give you a hint. It was one of the ones on my last list. Anybody want to just hazard a guess? Inseparable. Thank you. You get the $20 later. That's fantastic. All right, so owner dependence. Owner dependence. If I am my business and I'm trying to sell it and I don't want to go with it, what do I have to sell? Nothing, right? Probably, unless I have some good inventory or plant and equipment or something. So the owner dependence index. This is a tool that my firm has licensed to use. It's a 40-question questionnaire, and again, if this is of interest to you, there's no cost for it, there's no obligation, you get an automatic report generated, but just ask your Triumph banker and they'll send you the link for it, and you'll get a report. And what the report will do is show you, on a scale of 1 to 100, how dependent your business is on you. 100 means 100% dependent. 1 would be a pure investment. So it'd be like any of us owning Apple stock or IBM stock. We own it, and as long as we keep buying their stuff, we don't get a vote or a voice, right? So typically, any score 75 or north, you might want to work on a little bit. And then the report itself will then break the business down into 8 key functional areas of the business and then give a similar score from 1 to 100. So again, if that's of interest to you, it provides you with a great starting place. What's the first step? You need to diagnose before you can prescribe. So this will help you at least see the extent to which your business may be dependent upon you. Then you can work with your Triumph banker and the rest of your professional team to reduce or eliminate your business's dependence on you to make it more transferable. Okay? Now this next one, I love this concept, and we're going to have to only spend about a minute or two on it. But it's the exit quadrant chart. It's getting a little wonky on you here, but every business owner can fit into one of these 4 boxes. And it's really based on how financially ready you are to sell your business, so financial readiness, as well as mental readiness. So as a certified financial planner, I'll start with the financial one. It's easier for me. Very simple. How much money do you have today? What do you expect it to grow to based on some conservative assumptions? What amount of money would you need to have in order to maintain your lifestyle or whatever other personal goals, financial goals you have? And what's the delta? What's the difference between those two? So let's just say hypothetically it's $10 million. Okay, so that's part A. Part B is, realistically, what do you believe you could sell your business for now or at some point in the future on a net after-tax basis? To the extent that number is less than $10 million, you're probably not financially ready yet. To the extent that it's greater than $10 million, you probably are. I'm very much oversimplifying it, but in the essence of time, makes sense, right? Next is mental readiness. Mental readiness is a little tougher to get your arms around. So for those of you who have advanced degrees or designations, if you're an MD, a PhD, an attorney, a CPA, or if you're a business owner who has really helped, or the business, you and your business, have an identity that are it's inseparable. You do a lot of community service work through your business. So it begs the question, what the heck are you gonna do? And who are you going to be? This gets a little soft, but who are you if you're no longer a doctor, or no longer a practicing attorney, or no longer the president, founder, and CEO of XYZ company? So mental readiness. So once you kind of plot where you are in each of these 4 quadrants, it helps identify what your game plan should be or could be today. Like, so for example, in the bottom right-hand corner, the bottom left-hand corner, low financial readiness and low mental readiness. Well, if you're really in that box, maybe it makes sense to stay and grow, which means as you talk to your Triumph banker and everybody else that's part of your team, rather than talking about liquidity strategies or exit strategies, let's talk about how we grow. Should we maybe we should go in the acquisition mode. Maybe we should be in a position where we're expanding our product line or service line horizontally or vertically. Make sense? In the upper right-hand corner, those are the folks that have without most options at their disposal. They're rich and ready to go. They're financially independent, mentally they're ready, so they have way more options available to them. All right, next, 5 major exit options. And again, I'm going really fast, I know. Now, as you put a deal together, clearly there are hundreds of different iterations of deal structure, so I'm trying to just give at a very, very high level 5 key areas or themes or ways. One is an outright sale of the business. Clearly an external transfer, you're selling the entire business. There's a pretty good likelihood that the owner of the business is out of a job the day the business closes or soon thereafter. So outright sale might be to a competitor or another private company. Private equity group recapitalization transactions, that's where you sell a portion of the business today. The private equity group infuses cash, perhaps becomes part of that stay and grow strategy, so that the second sale, the second bite of the apple, if you will, is hopefully worth a heck of a lot more than the first piece that you sold. Third is a management buyout. And you all in the audience may or may not know this, but Triumph actually focuses on helping management buyouts come to fruition, and in some very creative ways. So again, talk to your banker if you have any questions about that. Employee stock ownership plans. I get asked about these all the time, and again, you guys don't really know me, but I tend to draw things a lot. And drawing an employee stock ownership plan, the flow of everything, it's pretty tricky. I don't know, there's like 18 or so different arrows you have to draw. And I get the question every time. I personally have never seen a company that we've gone through the process with end up opting for that. Based on the statistics that I've seen, there are about 7,000 or less of them in the entire country. So it seems to be one of those topics that a lot of people talk about, and when the fact pattern fits, it's a home run. And other than that, it's really complicated drawings that people don't understand, and then they tend to choose another one. Gifting programs. So this is if I own a business, perhaps I want to gift it to my family, perhaps I want to gift it to charity. We do a lot of work on the custodial side with Fidelity, for example. They have a great charitable gifting program, or a great charitable fund. You can actually gift shares of your business to them as long as you plan on selling it within the next 2-3 years, and it becomes part of your estate plan and everything like that. So gifting. Now clearly, gifting isn't an option if you're not in the rich and ready to go quadrant, right? If you need the money, you certainly can't gift it. So life's all about choices. So what is a private business worth? Anybody want to help me on this one? What's it worth? Well, there are a lot of different answers to this. I think the most accurate one is, it depends. It depends. Unlike a share of IBM stock or Apple stock, which we can all argue whether we believe it's worth what it's trading for, we at least know what it's trading for at any given moment, right? So what is a private business worth? It depends. And this is where I'll introduce what I call the range of values concept, range of values. So depending on the type of transaction, of which we just covered 5, will tend to drive what the valuation is. Gifting. Now with gifting, this is a little counterintuitive. If you're really giving it away, you actually want the business to be valued at the lowest possible value, because then from a tax perspective, it's most tax efficient. Employee stock ownership plan, fair market value. Management buyout typically is investment value. Recapitalization transaction, investment value, meaning they're looking at the forward-looking cash flows and coming up with some investment value. And outright sale could be a synergy value. Synergy meaning the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and as a result, they may pay you in premium in order to get your business because it allows them to expand into a market or do something that they couldn't or wouldn't do on their own. All right, exit planning pitfalls to avoid. I'm down to about 5 minutes of my talk. This is my favorite slide, but we're gonna go fast. All right, first one, not analyzing the business through a lens of a potential buyer. I was sitting last week having lunch with a good friend of mine who leads the valuation team for a national CPA firm. And he said, Rob, I don't know why business owners don't plan better and prepare for the due diligence process, because it's like you have a final exam on Friday and you get the questions on Wednesday and you don't do anything with them. Pretty much due diligence is, again, oversimplifying, pretty standard and straightforward. So if you know the questions that are going to be asked, if you know what the information requests should look like, why the heck wouldn't you prepare and look at your business through the lens of that buyer to identify risks and challenges within your business that would make that buyer either run for the hills or try to steer your business with a lowball offer. Make sense? Not having a business-savvy banking partner? Where could you find one of those? Inadequate accounting systems. See this all the time. It's like when you're a kid and you have the two cans in the string. A lot of times when we go into business, very successful businesses, they started on a shoestring, literally, and their businesses have grown, but their accounting systems have not. Big problem, or can be a big problem. Expenses are out of control. I'm just going to read these now. Clients and vendors are too highly concentrated. No written or outdated shareholder agreement. Inadequate management incentive plans or key person funding strategies. And we've been seeing this a lot lately. Potential liabilities within qualified retirement plans. Companies that put in defined benefit plans, the buyers are delving into those details as they should to identify what that potential liability would be. Check, by the way, check they might have to write at some point to fix it. All right, this is actually my favorite picture probably of all times. Have you outgrown your team? Have you outgrown your team? It goes back to the idea of, hey, maybe your business started small, and you had Uncle Willie doing this and this buddy doing that, and that was fine. They got you where you needed to go, but sometimes what got you here won't get you there. You guys have all heard that saying, right? So if you're building a high-powered exit team, what are the seats that you should consider filling? Well, clearly you're a Triumph banker, that's why we're all here. Asset protection attorney, business attorney, a growth consultant if you're in that stay and grow mode, a business valuation expert. You guys can read the rest of them. And my closing slide is quarterbacking a high-powered exit team. You need somebody, I would propose, that serves that quarterback role, that is sitting on your side of the table with you, who is your advocate to help you navigate everything, put everything together, and bring in the other tangentially related professionals that you really need to identify where you are today, identify what your options are, and then help you put a plan in place. That concludes my formal commentary. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rob. Well, good afternoon. My name is Britt Boatwright, and I'm the Chief Banking Officer at Triumph Bank. Oh, here we go. Again, my name is Britt Boatwright, and I'm the Chief Banking Officer here at Triumph Bank, and I oversee loan and deposit production for the bank. Let me first thank Rob for that fantastic report and for making the trip from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to spend time with us, sharing your insights on exit strategies. The next component to our program will be a panel discussion of local experts that I'm going to ask to come forward here in just a moment. But before I do, I want to reiterate what our CEO, Will Chase, stated as he welcomed everyone to the event. We pride ourselves in being a locally owned community bank. We were founded over 10 years ago to help local business folks start, grow, ultimately potentially sell their business, and we've seen a tremendous amount of businesses we've been able to help, and we hope we can help you. We're delighted that you're here. We're delighted that you've joined us, and now I'd like to go ahead and introduce the panel one by one who will be seated in front of the podium. First, let me introduce Mitchell Spurlock. He's the chairman of Power Logistics and Freight Services. Mitchell, if you'd come on down. Let me also mention that Mitchell is on the board of directors of Triumph Bank. Our next panelist is Jeffrey Meskin. He's partner and head of private banking at Brown Brothers Harriman. Jeffrey, if you come join us. Mary Helen Owen, who is a member of the Ferris Babango law firm. Michael Bruns, founder and former president of Comtrak Logistics. Chip Marston, CEO and senior partner of the Marston Group, local CPA firm here in Memphis. Also, Triumph Bank board member. And then we've asked Rob Wolfe, who you've just heard from, join us for the panel discussion as well. So Rob and I were both wrestlers, and it feels like Thunderdome. So if I ask a tough question, he's going to body slam. We'll just pass the mic around as we go. So as we get started, I wanted to start with Jeff. Jeff Meskin, partner and head of private banking at Brown Brothers Harriman. Given your extensive background in the private equity arena, which Rob spoke to, can you speak to the range of options from your perspective a business owner faces when evaluating the opportunity to sell the business?
Thanks, Britt. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a little bit of background. Brown Brothers Harriman is actually, we're going to celebrate our 200th year next year, founded in 1818. And amongst other things that I do, I manage our private equity business. Our private equity business has about $2 billion in capital under management, and we invest in privately held businesses. Just a couple of things taking sort of the next level down from what Rob was talking about, which generally set a pretty good foundation. So Rob mentioned that there was $1 trillion of capital sitting on the sidelines in private equity waiting to be invested. That number is large, but understated, believe it or not. The number actually, as of last week, was $1.24 trillion. The majority of that, however, is in funds that have more than $250 million under management. So what's actually pretty interesting is that larger funds can only do transactions so far down in terms of size. And so there are approximately 390,000 businesses in the United States, 94% of which have less than $100 million in revenue. So I think what is sort of very interesting is the intersection of private businesses and that pool of available investee companies and the capital. While there's a lot of it, it's not always matched well. And so a lot of the things that Rob was talking about, you really need to focus on in order to become attractive, because it's not just sort of put your business up for sale. And so, Rob gave a good overview in terms of what the alternatives are. But I think the first question that everybody has to ask is, do you want to sell all of your business? Do you want to sell most of your business? Or do you want to sell a minority interest in your business? Because that'll dictate whether it's a strategic buyer or a financial buyer, which is most often known as a private equity firm or family office, sort of what your options are and how you should go about sort of pursuing them. So when I begin to talk to business owners, and having done this for about 20 years and invested in a number of businesses, and one of our partners is actually here today, fortunate to have him, that we invested in his business. We first look at, how do you want to live afterwards? Are you looking to exit? Do you have kids? Do you have anybody you want to pass it to? Other shareholders? If you don't, it becomes an easy question, and then you're going to sell all of your business. However, there's opportunities, depending upon how old you are, to sell a majority of your business or a minority portion of your business, partner with a financial firm like ours, and take 2 bites at the apple. And the way the tax laws are written today, it's very advantageous. Now, who knows what the gang in Washington is going to come up with, but I would suggest and sort of put forth that today's taxing schema is really set up for private business owners to take on a financial partner, take on some leverage if there are good growth prospects. And so one other thing, just to sort of frame it, and I think Rob did a very good job in sort of talking about the supply and demand of capital and how that impacts multiples paid for businesses. I'd like to take it from the reverse so that everybody understands the dynamic. So the other job that I have on a day-to-day basis is I invest about $32 billion on behalf of our clients in a wide range of asset classes. And when you start to think about owning private businesses, particularly for investors who are the high net worth, ultra high net worth category, you think about a couple of things. One is, when you own a piece of a private business, you're essentially compounding your capital on a tax-deferred basis. And so the historic returns of private equity are about 500 to 600 basis points higher than the U.S. stock market. The U.S. stock market over any 100-year period, plus or minus, excluding financial crises, has returned about 7% net to the investors. Private equity, even after all the fees and all the everything, sort of in the high teens. and there's a little bit of dispersion with that. So this phenomenon is not going anywhere. So the one thing I want to implore is that while, yes, there's a lot of capital, there's going to be a lot of capital for as long as the eye can see, because this asset class is more difficult to access. It has provided historically higher returns. It will, by definition, continue to provide historically higher returns. And so just sort of a framework.
Jeffrey, thank you. That's very insightful. You mentioned taxes, and so I've got to change direction a little bit and go to Chip Marston. So the theme of our event is developing successful exit strategies for your business. With this in mind, how do you advise your clients to transition from managing or deferring tax to managing and increasing value of the business through profits?
Well, they're related. First of all, Jeff gave a really good answer a moment ago. I agree with everything he said about the tax scheme that we have now favoring private equity investments. I don't think anything's going to, this is my personal opinion, I don't think anything's going to happen anytime soon that's going to change that.
And that was one to write down, by the way.
All right, how's that?
There you go.
There we go. Is that better? Yeah. Much better. Let me say, first of all, or should I say second of all, this is a room full of very sophisticated people because I know most of you. I see a lot of our clients, a lot of my respected, friendly competitors, and a lot of my colleagues. So I feel like this is a refresher. I'll also say that I've testified in court over the last 30 years, probably about 80 times, and this is a very intimidating scene relative to that. But I believe Britt asked a question, and I think the question was, how do we transition from a tax planning strategy to an income maximization and value maximization strategy? The answer is we don't. We do both. It's not an either or. We typically, I mean, each situation is unique, but we typically start with the economics, and we focus on the economics of a business. And I feel, and I think most of the people in this room would agree, our highest and best use as a member of the team would be to work with the client to understand the revenue cycles, the expense cycles, the operations, what the goals of the business are, to maximize that. So you've got to start with the economics, and that's what we focus on. Then, once we have a good understanding of that, we help develop a comprehensive tax strategy to minimize or defer the taxes. Because obviously, if you minimize taxes or defer, you maximize your earnings, which has a direct impact on your valuation. Now, as I said, taxes are going nowhere, but it's extraordinarily important to deal with this in a very sophisticated way. From an ongoing business perspective, it is a huge drag on earnings. From a seller's perspective, it has a direct impact on the net cash at sale. But another very important factor is from the buyer's perspective, and we see this more and more, the buyers tend to be very, very focused on tax compliance, but more specifically, the documentation of the tax compliance, because the states are getting more aggressive, the local, it's a hard word, municipalities are getting much more aggressive. We have inconsistent policy state to state. So from a buyer's perspective, it's very important for a business owner to have its compliance strategy very well documented. So to summarize the question, or to summarize the answer, we focus on economics, we develop tax planning, and then we work on the documentation of the compliance strategy.
Thank you, Chip. So we've heard from the CPA. I want to hear from the attorney now. Mary Helen, so you played a key role in advising numerous companies on the buy and the sale side. We've talked a little bit about who folks might sell to, but could you speak to some capital structures you've seen buyers utilize that you've seen as successful strategies?
Yes, Britt, and I think as Rob pointed out, there's various buyers. So your various buyers are going to probably dictate what your capital structure might be. Capital structure basically consists of your debt side and your equity side. And so on the debt side, especially from a private equity group, you're going to see a more sophisticated financing that they'll put in place to acquire the company. Meaning, we've seen where they had like a senior loan, maybe a mezzanine loan, an asset-based loan for a revolver. They've had convertible debt, and then finally seller financing. So you do have variations of what the debt can consist of. On the other side of the capital structure, you'd have equity. And of the equity, you may be looking at preferred or common equity, stock or membership interest or whatever may be purchased. So it's a combination of the debt and the equity. And for like a third-party buyer, like I said earlier, with the private equity group, it's going to be a little more sophisticated. On the equity side, in addition to the common and preferred, you also have, as Rob mentioned earlier, management buyouts. So that's a type of equity there. And in addition to that, we look at rollover investors. And those are basically the owners of the company taking their current equity they have in the company being sold and rolling that into the new company. So that's a form of the equity also.
You touched on seller financing.
Yeah.
Pitfalls, considerations, anybody in the group that might be considering
Well,
selling and thinking they might own or finance it?
As far as seller financing goes, it could be great. If you're having a hard time selling your business, then you could offer seller financing. If you're a buyer and you're having a hard time obtaining financing and the seller's willing to do seller financing, then that's great. From a seller's standpoint, it could be good or bad. As far as you're then going to not get all your cash up front, which is a huge consideration. But on the flip side, with taxes, then you're selling it on an installment sales basis. So then you can defer your gain, and match it with the payment you receive under the note. In addition to that, with most seller financing, we see the note is secured. It can either be secured by the asset you just sold, or it can be secured by the ownership interest in the entity that's buying it. So if there is a default by the buyer, then you can end up getting the business back. And again, that's going to depend on the seller. That may be good or may be bad.
Sure. Well, as we've heard from the legal side, we've heard from the private investment side, we've heard from the accounting side. We've also got two experts in the room that have actually sold a business or more than one business in their past. And so I want to turn the corner and ask Mike Bruns, founder and former president of Comtrak Logistics, which he sold. As a business owner that's successfully sold a local company, can you elaborate on some of the most important things other than price that you factored into your decision to sell your business?
Be glad to. Thanks for the opportunity. Price was important, obviously, but I can tell you right now, I did not sell my company to the highest price. There were other major considerations. The biggest one for me was what happens to me? What role will I play? Will it be an important role? Will I have to allow myself to shape the future of the new company? And or will they trash what I've already created for 30-some years? It was very important to me. More important to me was what would be with the employees. I wanted to make sure that my employees, regardless of how long I was able to stay on, I could leverage the employees. So what I didn't want to do was sell to a company, and there were higher bids, that duplicated what I did. I wanted to sell to someone who I complemented their company versus at one point competed with. Because if I competed with them, I could tell you that all my folks would be eliminated. I would know that. And I can tell you, Memphis is a small city, and I had terminals throughout the entire country. But what could be worse than having a pocket full of money from a sale and bump into your employees, or what I should say, former employees who will no longer have a job? You don't have much money in your pocket anymore. So it's very, very important to me. I also wanted to make sure that the company that purchased me allowed me to participate with employees partaking in some of the sale. So stock options and things like this, and it was a publicly traded company that did that, and I was able to do that. It worked out very well. But I do think that It's a wonderful way, depending on how you sell your company, you can create a legacy for yourself if you do it right. You pay attention to the softer side of the transaction, because all of the hard side is very, very important. But there is a softer side that needs to be addressed, because no one's going to remember how many trucks you had or how many terminals you had or what your gross revenues were. They're going to remember how you treated the very people that brought you to the top in the first place. So that's probably was my number one objective.
That is very refreshing. Thank you, Mike. Mitchell Spurlock also has had success in selling and buying local business. Mitchell, speak to the challenges of, of running your business while you're in the process of marketing or selling your business.
Yeah, Brett, the first thing is, as Rob said, once you get over that initial hurdle of that you're actually going to put your business out to sell, that's probably the most agonizing as a business owner, that you've spent, so many years building something. But once you get over that hurdle, probably my best advice would be to, do the due diligence and form a representative team around you. Like some of these experts sitting up here, I got to give Mary Helen a shout out, because she actually is involved in everything I've ever done. So, but anyway, you form a kind of a firewall around your team, around your executive team. And then the second thing with that group, whether it be your accounting firm and your representation firm or the legal guys, kind of spend some time teaching them your business, because there's one thing, your executive team's already working 60 hours a week. They've got a full-time job. They don't need to be part of your due diligence, so as much as you can deflect the questions from the private equity firms that are going to be asking, doing smart things like setting up the virtual data room so they can go in and look at the numbers all they want. And it kind of gives you a gauge on who's really interested and who's not, because you know how many hours they're in there looking at something. So if they're in there for 10 minutes, not to spend much time with them. If they're in there for 2 hours, you may have somebody on the line. The second thing is to prepare your executive team, because once you start having those dinners where you're having the meet and greet, we actually spent a lot of time who's going to answer what question, how you're going to answer it. And then also you want to make sure that if you're going to be exiting the firm, that you're pushing your executive team forward in the answer of the questions. And then probably the final thing is something that Mike said, which I think is just so important. Be transparent with your employees. Suddenly these guys with suits start showing up. You're going in your conference room, you're shutting the door in there for hours. There's things that are way out of character. They're not stupid. And the next thing you've got their worry, the anxiety level goes up with them, and then just keep them abreast what's going on. And basically, as Mike said, just reassure them that you've got their back. Because as you wouldn't be selling this company without them. And their jobs are just as important as the income that you're making. So I think that would probably be
That's fantastic. Rob, as we're contemplating some of these strategies and what the business owners need to be thinking and contemplating when they're selling, what about some risk management along the way? What elements of risk do you caution against, or do you help manage these folks?
Great question. When I was giving my comments, I mentioned the fact that we tend to like to look at businesses through the lens of a potential buyer. So we've identified a process where we do that. We've created a long list of tangible facets of a business that we evaluate. There's probably a little over 100 now. And then we score the client across each of those areas that relate to their situation, classic red, yellow, and green scoring. So the risk management side is probably 20 to 25% of the things that we're looking at and evaluating for a typical business. I would say the couple of areas where we see the most reds most frequently, first would be on creditor or asset protection. And you would think that that would have already been taken care of somewhere along the way, but we're seeing that it's not. And it's an overlap between business asset and creditor protection and personal asset and creditor protection. But I live in South Florida. The two biggest expressways are Interstate 95 and the Turnpike. And you take your life into your hands when you drive on either of them. And that being said, 2 out of every 3 billboards is 1-800-SUE-ME or sue somebody, right? And I know that's not unique to South Florida. We all live in a very litigious society, not just us way down south. I was driving around your freeways here, and yeah, maybe it's not 2 out of 3, but it's more like 1 out of 3 of your billboards is sue somebody. So making sure that the bullseye that you as a successful business owner, or if you're a professional helping successful business owners, the bullseye that they have on their chest as their business grows and the news leaks out that their business has sold or transacted, that you didn't just make that bullseye that much bigger. Because then what good did you do for that business owner? That would be the first. Number 2 would be key person planning. Key person planning. So that's when you look at your business and you say, hey, out of all the people on my team, if Sally or Jimmy or Joe, if something happens to them, what is the impact on my business? What is the impact on my business? And a lot of times business owners I've seen will think about, well, what if one of those people die? Then they buy life insurance, key person life insurance on that person. And that's great. I would absolutely recommend that they do that. But there should be some formal process to evaluate the appropriate amount and structure and things like that. But secondly, I've almost never seen the business owner or the business obtain key person disability income protection insurance on those key people. Yet there's a 30 to 40% higher likelihood that that key person will actually become disabled while employed by your company than dying. So I would say you should check that out if you haven't already.
Good advice. As Mitchell was talking about the potential buyers contacting your staff with respect to financials or questions, it leads to the concept of how much time it takes to sell a business. And so, Chip, I've heard you talk about the runway or the timeline necessary. And so folks in the audience that are considering this, what kind of time allocation do they need to be thinking about?
Well, I think this is, I think it's essential to have a long runway if there's any way possible. And I know everyone up here would agree that the assembly of good information early and the assembling of a good team early are just critical. From an accountant's perspective, I think what I'm about to talk about is maybe one of the best areas where you can be of service to your client. And there's 4, if you'll indulge me, there's 4 major areas that I see time and time again. But the most successful exits do take time, and they take good relationships. It takes time to prepare for sale, for the company to be sold. Operationally, document your processes and your systems. Really document them. We'll talk about financial statements in a minute, but that's incredibly important. You've got to have time to prepare economically. Is your cash flow where it needs to be? What about your debt reduction strategy? All these things take time, and you have to be methodical about it. And then most important is the time to prepare emotionally. I've heard Mitchell talk about it. I've heard Mike talk about it. All of us know folks. It's hard to be a founder and then walk away from your baby after X number of years. So there's a tremendous amount of time involved there. But we talked earlier, Rob talked earlier about the transaction team. I think it takes time to develop that team and then for that team to gel, because I think that it's incredibly important to develop strong relationships among that transaction team and among the management group or the seller group, because this is an extremely stressful, extremely emotional time. And you've got to have people that you trust, that can tell you things you don't want to hear, and it just takes time to get to that point. Time to build and accumulate good information. I cannot emphasize this enough. You've got to build your internal processes and document them. And I would say the majority of closely held companies I've worked with, in the early days certainly, just don't have great processes, and they certainly do not have them documented. So that is absolutely essential as you start down this runway for an exit. you need to build your accounting resources. And I mean that internal and external. You've got to get, in my opinion, you've got to get the absolute best accounting people that you can get inside your company and get the best external accounting people that you feel comfortable with, that you trust outside your company. And it's extremely important, in my opinion, for those accountants, internal and external, to share or at least understand your vision for what you want your company to be. Because I've seen situations where a company owner had a certain vision for how they wanted to exit, but either it was not shared with their financial people or it just was not a priority. And it created problems as we got further down the road and certainly into the diligence process. I mentioned accounting and financial statements. You absolutely have to have systems that are sufficient, up to date, as Rob mentioned, and can produce timely and accurate financial statements very, very quickly. You've got to have these things on the shelf. We've talked about all the cash chasing deals. If you don't have your financial statements up to date, if there's any kind of issue in your financials in the diligence process, it can, A, cause the diligence process to, the cost to skyrocket, because remedial accounting is very expensive, or more likely, it means the deal goes away because there's a lot of cash chasing deals and there's such a credibility factor, a loss of credibility if the financials just are not what they need to be. And internal controls are a function of that. Then finally, my favorite aspect of this is family dynamics. You have got to have time to take the family out of the family business. You know, you gotta know, are family members interested in this business? Are family members qualified to be in this business? How do you achieve equitable treatment among family members if some are in and some are out? How do you protect the family? How do you protect the company in the event of marriage and divorce? And how do you deal with differing objectives? Some family members want to sell, some family members never want to sell. So those are the family dynamics. You could put that in the category of the softer side, but it is the most difficult side. And I'm sure everyone in this room has seen it. But that is why I talk about the long runway. How long? I would say a minimum of 3 to 5 years. Sometimes you don't have that luxury, but you just, if you had the luxury, that's what I would say.
Wonderful. Well, we're hoping today can be the first step in that process for some folks that joined us. I'm a numbers guy, and Jeff Meskin said a couple things that grabbed my attention. So I want to direct a couple, or at least a question back to Jeff. First of all, he said that his company, Brown Brothers Harriman, had been around 200 years. Wow, that's remarkable. And I heard you say you managed $36 billion in private investment. So who better to help us answer this question? And I wanted Rob to answer it, and his answer was depends. Whenever the question was, what's the business worth? It depends. Yeah. So I'm going to ask Jeff, see if he'll answer this question. So as I'm sitting in the audience, and I want to know what's my business worth, can you help this group come up with some general idea of an EBITDA multiple? You tell us.
Yeah, it depends. It's a pretty good answer. But so what does it depend on, right? So first of all, industry is key. I'd like to think that we're unique as a private equity investor, but most private equity investors, unless they're a specialist in one particular industry, of which there are many, by the way, and you sort of look at businesses with competitive advantage, with recurring revenues, with high barriers to entry, and very good returns on capital. And so when you have those kinds of characteristics, they tend to trade at very high multiples. What's sort of an added fuel today is capital is by and large cheap. So if you think about the sort of rise of the private equity industry and leveraged buyout industry, it's very easy to trace it to one causal factor, and that is the bull market in credit that started when Paul Volcker broke the back of inflation. From 1982 till today, it has been an extraordinary bull market for credit. So the returns that I talked about in private equity, I think everybody who's in the business would like to think of themselves as extraordinarily smart, but really all they did was recognize that money was getting cheaper. Add to that our legislators and Congress and whatnot decided that you can deduct interest expense, and it made it yet cheaper. So they've almost made it free to borrow money. If you think about it today, not that we would do this because we're sort of against a lot of leverage, but we have been offered 6 to 7 times leverage at an average debt constant below 7%. On an after-tax basis, that cost of capital is 4.25%. I mean, that's breathtaking. Now, your margin for error with that kind of constructed capital or that kind of capital structure is too much for me to bear, but it's out there and it's driving prices. And so when you think about multiples today in a asset light, meaning high returns on capital, business with really interesting characteristics and growth. And growth today is not 20% compounded growth. If you can grow your revenue on a consistent basis in the high single digits to low double digits, you are a high growth company in today's market. You're not Silicon Valley kind of Uber valuations, but in the kind of businesses that we tend to see in this region, that is a very attractive growth profile. It usually means you're growing your earnings and profits, no matter how you do it, in the high teens. You compound that kind of return with on a tax-deferred basis with low cost of capital, and that's very interesting, and you can easily get to multiples that are in the 10 to 12 times range. And that's sort of commonplace. We bid for a company last week. We bid 11 times and only lost by about 40%. So there are people out there buying stuff at 15, 16 times. We're not going to do that, but there are people who are going to do that. And it sort of goes back to that supply-demand imbalance. And now on the other hand, and I had this conversation with Mike, and by the way, the multiples paid, you do pay a higher multiple for a company with the right culture and employees, because you're really buying that. So what I heard Mike and Mitch sort of go through, that in terms of thinking about enhancing the value of your business, you could not have gotten better advice from these two entrepreneurs, because we spend more time sitting around with all these Harvard MBAs and whatnot talking about what are we really buying, at the end of the day. And it's people in almost every business. Warren Buffett has this saying that he wants a business that an idiot can run. The only problem is that, there are very few of them that are out there. And so if you think about an asset-heavy business like Mike sold, those used to trade at about 6 to 7 times. They now trade about 8 to 9 times if they have decent growth prospects.
Wow. Mary Helen, we talked about selling to family members. Well, we didn't really talk about it. I would like to talk about it. A lot of folks that own a business are going through the process of, can I sell it to my kids? Can I give it to my kids? Talk about, if you would, some of the components that are different about selling to a family member rather than to a venture capitalist type.
Well, I concur with what Chip said, mostly about selling to family members. It is an easier process. You would think that they're already familiar with the business, so that makes it easier. However, what we've seen is selling to family members doesn't always maximize the value of the company. You can definitely maximize it more with a third party, private equity, or even a competitor. So you really have to take that in consideration. And goodwill, you know, that's a huge component nowadays with a lot of the acquisitions, and selling to family members, you kind of lose that. So, but again, like I said earlier, on the flip side, it is easier. They are familiar with the business, so you don't have to go through as much of the due diligence process as Chip was talking about. And I have to add, he was talking about from the financial due diligence. The legal due diligence is a nightmare most of the time. You know, we go into companies, and I don't mean to get off topic a little bit, but it's important to understand the legal side, because if somebody's coming in to buy your company, it's like you're selling your house. They want to see everything. They're going to open the closet doors. They want it clean. And so that's the problem we run into a lot of times with sellers. On the surface, it looks good, but the buyer's going to want to see every single contract you have. And it doesn't do them any good to give them a contract that's not signed by the other party. Things like that. So the legal side of the due diligence is just as important. So if you do sell it to a family member, you don't have quite as many worries. It's a little bit easier. But, you know, again, as I said, I don't think you maximize your value that way. And it does perpetuate your family interest in the business, if that's what you're interested in.
Mike, you've used, the theme of our event is exit strategies, but I've heard you use the term entrance strategy. Can you elaborate on entrance strategy?
Sure. Yeah, everybody talks about the exit strategy, how you're going to do it. And Rob, I got to tell you, you did a great job on the exit. But I would tell you that I spend as much time almost on what my entrance is going to be, because I've seen so many of my pals. You talk about baby boomers, man, there's a bunch of us. And I've watched a bunch of them. I think entrepreneurs kind of hang around together, and they do their business and talk. And I've watched so many of them when they left their business, whether it was the day they signed the contract or fulfilled their contract, they had no plan. And they were going to play it by ear and see what happens. And it was a failure, a miserable failure, because golf is great, but if you get to golf every day, it's not fun anymore. Nothing is fun if you get to do it all the time. It's the excitement of not being able to do it that makes it exciting. And so people that didn't have an entrance plan were miserable. They thought they would stay at home. That don't work. You got to get out, man. It's just the way it is. I mean, it's not your kitchen to run, okay? And so I think when people go from 100 miles an hour to 0 because they're going to allow themselves to figure out what they want to do, I think they're making a huge mistake. I think you have to have some kind of a plan going forward. Quite frankly, it's even difficult when you're sitting around a conference table and they go around the table and you have to introduce yourself. And then you're sitting there thinking, well, who am I now? I used to be Mike, Comtrak guy, the truck guy. But so you better hurry up and make an identification. I was fortunate enough, and I'll give some advice, that I wanted to stay sharp. And I think anybody that has a business and built it successfully and sells it must be reasonably on top of things. And so that person needs to utilize those skills somewhere else. And I was lucky enough to have two lives. One was in the business, and then two, to apply some of the business experience that I earned by working 30-some, almost 40 years, to the nonprofit side. The nonprofit side in any city is a big sponge. They need people who know stuff. And you could be surprised how much you would be accepted. You don't have to work every day at a nonprofit, that's not my point. But you get on a couple different boards and these people really, really soak up what you already know and that we take for granted as business owners. And I get to say now that I've had two lives. One is now when it goes around the table, I'm Mike Bruns, a community activist or whatever. And that's a good deal. So I keep the brain going, and I already got enough money, so it works out real well. I would say one thing, speaking of having enough money, and then I'll get off. Don't kid yourself because you had a successful business and you sold it and you made a pretty good return that you're real smart. Because how many people I've watched, they get confused that they're really smart, and then they buy a restaurant, they know all, and they start going into areas they don't have a clue, but they think they got this golden touch because they made one darn good deal. You settle down, you know, you need to you need to stick to your knitting. I think too many people, they get the big head about how smart they are. I would say that steer clear of that a little bit.
What's
That's
that
all.
adage? The way to make a small fortune is to start with a large one?
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I ended up with $1 million in the trucking business, but I started with 2.
Mitchell, my next question, I'm trying to think how to frame it, and they say the 2 happiest days of a boat owner are the day that they bought the boat and the day that they sold the boat. And I've sold and bought boats, and I agree, the happier day for me was the day I sold the boat. But business, you bought and sold several businesses. What's the more exciting, what's the more exhilarating time for you, the day you sell it or the day you buy it?
Well, first of all, I got a boat to sell if somebody wants to buy it. But well, really, you know, there's a lot of anxieties on both sides of that. You know, Brett, I think the first thing, of course, the obvious would be you always want to be the seller because you're waiting on somebody to say, we're making the wire transfer now. But like Mike said, and he said this on a call, and it just struck home. So, you know, but then the next day when you wake up, you're not who you were 24 hours earlier, and so your whole life changed. The way your wife looks at you now, you're not the boss. You know, the people, you're not the boss. Even though you may be on the board, when you go into your office that you built, you're not the boss anymore. You know, you may be the president, but you're not the boss. There's a private equity guys that are really telling you what to do. On the other side, Brett, it's just as anxiety is, you know, you go through the due diligence process, you know, looking under the covers as much as you can, and always in the back of your mind, no matter how good your team is, the legal team and the risk management people and the accountants, you're always worried about one thing. Did they miss something or something like that that's going to come back to bite you? And then most important is you're thinking about, it's kind of like, be careful what you wish for, because when you get it, then it takes on a whole different dynamic, is now you have to integrate this into your life, if it's a strategic purchase, what you were, you know, into your group. And I know in my early years at Federal Express, the hardest thing we tried doing was integrating Flying Tigers into our group. I mean, it was quite frankly, it was just 2 separate cultures. And those are really smart people put that deal together. So I think it's kind of, each side has its own, personal dynamic. And just to further what Mike's point is, I remember right after I sold the company, and I was at a fundraiser, and this gentleman came up to me. He was a senator, and he came over and said, "I understand you sold your company, and how are you doing?" But then he looked at my wife and goes, "But more important, how are you doing having him around now?" So it really is kind of a big challenge.
That's great response. So Rob, I'm gonna wrap our questions up with the last one. I don't know if it's the most fun question, but it seems like it would be to me. So when these business owners sell their business and have a pile of cash, what do they do with it? How do you help advise a client what to do with that pile of money?
Sure, that's a great question. And Mitchell, really quick, I didn't hear you answer how your wife's doing. I didn't hear you answer how your wife is actually doing.
Well, actually, I'm the guy that Mike spoke of a few minutes ago. She said, "Go back and buy something else. I don't, just get out of the house."
All right, I got it. All right. Sorry, Britt. It was a burning question. I thought everybody probably wanted to know.
Great question.
But in terms of managing somebody's investment portfolio, I mean, that's the business that I've been in for 26 years. So I actually know that one a lot better than business exit plan consulting, which is a lot of fun and incredibly helpful and impactful to clients. As far as investing, so what do? We're math geeks, right? So we want to know what the client needs mathematically. How do they define their lifestyle? What are they spending today? What is the timing and magnitude of future distributions that they think they're going to need for whatever purpose? Buy another property, buy another business, help their kids, grandkids, great-grandkids go through college. So we build all that in and back into what is the required mathematical rate of return for them to achieve all of their personal goals and objectives. That's the starting place. We then design the portfolio in a way that we believe gives them the highest likelihood of achieving that return with the least amount of risk along the way. And when we're doing that, the implementation, sure, we use traditional asset classes like stocks, bonds, cash. We do. But we also put our risk reduction hats on and tax minimization hats on in order to try to be creative, to try to help the client obtain the returns that they need, irrespective of what the stock market does. Because people don't want to stop spending money or sending their kids and grandkids to college just because the market's down 20 or 30%. So that requires us to include different asset classes, perhaps private equity. So now we've just helped them sell their business. Maybe we invest a piece of it in private equity. Maybe we invest a piece of it in some type of a triple net lease commercial real estate portfolio. Maybe we use some of it in, I don't know, like some type of an enhanced fixed income strategy or something like that. So it's very, very unique, and it's based on each individual. But we're really looking to figure out what do we need to accomplish and how do we get them there with the least amount of risk along the way, no matter what's going on in the world.
Got it. Well, Rob, you had some great slides and you had the light bulb effect. And so I know that you made the comment that if anybody wants to see some of those slides or some of those self-help test books, that you'd be glad to provide it. And I think the comment was a Triumph Bank associate, a Triumph banker can help you with that. There's several Triumph bankers in the crowd. If you're a Triumph banker, will you stand up so that folks will know who you are? If anyone has any questions of a Triumph banker after we wrap up, and we're just about to wrap up and head into the reception, please seek out one of the Triumph Bank bankers, or you can email us in any way you'd like for us to follow up. And we also will be doing a survey. This is the first time we've done this. Our plan is to continue to provide this type of service on an annual basis, but we need your help to know what did we do good, what did we not do so good at, how could we improve, what are other topics you'd like to hear more about. And I just want to thank our panel for all your time and a fantastic responses. So I'd just like to give a round of applause to the panel. With that, we're adjourned. The reception, the food and drink is in the lobby where you checked in, and we're adjourned. Thank you for coming. Oh, and there is a survey. We'll be emailing you a survey with those questions on it, so be looking for that in the next day or so. Thank you.